Welcome to the Explainer. Landing that first job? Absolutely huge milestone. I mean, there is literally nothing quite like the excitement of earning your very own money, right? But hey, if we're being totally honest, there's also nothing quite like the universal sticker shock of opening that very first paycheck and thinking, wait a second, where on earth did the rest of my money go? Well, today we're going to demystify that entire process. We're building a clear, easy to follow roadmap of exactly what happens to your money from the exact moment you earn it to the moment you save it. Okay, let's dive into this. Here is our clear 5-step roadmap tracking the life cycle of your paycheck. We're going to cover decoding paychecks, navigating employer benefits, building a monthly budget, establishing an emergency fund, and finally, investing for your future. Section 1, decoding your first paycheck and really understanding those taxes and deductions. So this brings us face to face with the very first hurdle of employment. It's facing the harsh reality that your take-home pay is significantly less than your gross pay. It's the single most common question people ask on payday. Where did my money go? And to answer that, we have to talk about taxes. Look, taxes are those necessary payments made to the government that actually provide the public goods and services for your community. So when you look at that missing chunk of your paycheck, what you're actually looking at is your personal contribution to things like national defense, streetlights, roads, highways, law enforcement, and public education. Your employer is legally required to withhold this money before that check ever even hits your hands. But how does your employer know exactly how much to take out? Well, they use Form W-4. Literally on day one of your new gig, your employer is going to hand you this Employees Withholding Certificate. The information you put on this form directly dictates how much federal income tax gets withheld from your wages. It's an absolutely critical piece of paperwork because, think about it, if you fill it out incorrectly, you could end up with a much smaller paycheck than you actually need. Or worse, you could get hit with a massive, totally unexpected tax bill at the end of the year. Now, beyond federal income tax, depending on where you happen to live, you might also see state and local income taxes pulled right from your earnings. And then, of course, you have Social Security and Medicare taxes. By January 31st of the following year, your employer is going to hand you a W-2 form, and that summarizes all of these exact withholdings. Just know it's totally normal to see all 4 of these mandatory deductions taking a little slice out of your gross pay. Because life is literally always changing, the IRS actually provides a super handy tool called the Tax Withholding Estimator. Honestly, you should use this tool every single January, or whenever you go through a major life event. Like getting married, buying a house, or maybe taking on a side hustle. Spending just 25 minutes with this estimator ensures your withholdings are perfectly accurate. That means you prevent a nasty surprise tax penalty, and you maximize your actual day-to-day take-home pay. Moving right along to Section 2, navigating your employer benefits and maximizing your day one paperwork. So transitioning from those mandatory taxes over to optional benefits. Your new employer might hand you a whole packet of health coverage options. And it's incredibly common for new employees to just feel totally overwhelmed and kind of ignore this active step. But you might be choosing between an HMO, a PPO, or a fee-for-service plan. Please don't just guess here. You really want to ask your HR department for 2 key documents, the Summary Plan Description and the Summary of Benefits and Coverage, or SBC. These documents will break down the covered benefits, what your portion of the premium is, and your out-of-pocket costs. That way, you can match the exact right health plan to your specific medical needs and your budget. And this brilliantly illustrates a totally jaw-dropping concept. I'm talking about free money. Seriously, when you enroll in an employer-sponsored retirement plan like a 401k, you need to check if your company offers a contribution match. If your employer matches, say, 50 cents for every dollar you save, guys, that is an immediate, guaranteed 50% return on your investment. Let me repeat that. A guaranteed 50% return on day one. There is virtually no other legal investment in the world that will give you that. Whatever you do, do not pass up the employer match. Let's roll into Section 3. Building your monthly budget and managing the actual cash flow you bring home. Okay, the paperwork is filed, the taxes are withheld, and the remaining money has finally hit your bank account. Now you need a really solid tracking-based strategy to manage the cash flow you're actually bringing home. A great place to start is the widely cited 50-30-20 budgeting rule highlighted by the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. It's just a fantastic benchmark for organizing your after-tax income. The goal here is to allocate roughly 50% to your absolute needs, stuff like housing and food. Then 30% goes to your wants, like dining out or maybe some entertainment. Finally, that remaining 20% is strictly dedicated to savings and debt repayment. It provides a clean, really visual allocation summary so you always know exactly where your money should be flowing. To actually make that 50-30-20 rule work, though, you have to separate your outflows into two distinct buckets: fixed expenses and variable expenses. Fixed expenses, think rent and insurance. Those are predictable. Variable expenses, like groceries and dining out, well, those fluctuate based on your day-to-day choices. This distinction is so vital because if your budget ever shows a deficit, meaning you're spending more than you earn, those variable categories are typically the easiest and fastest places you can cut back. So, how do we actually put all this into practice? Well, here's a highly practical 4-step process for you. First, log all your income sources so you know exactly what's coming in. Second, track your spending by category so you get a real, honest picture of where your money naturally goes. Third, map your bill due dates right on a calendar. This is crucial because if you keep coming up short at the end of the month, it might just be that the timing of your bills doesn't sync up with your payday. And finally, step 4, pull it all together to create a working budget that you can actually stick to. Let's jump to section 4, establishing an emergency fund to protect your money from unexpected shocks. Once your budget is humming along nicely, we have to prepare for those unexpected financial emergencies. You know, a fender bender, a crazy medical bill, dropping and breaking your phone. So the crucial point is establishing a dedicated cash reserve to protect your money from these shocks, specifically so they don't turn into high-interest credit card debt. A golden rule to live by is having at least 3 to 6 months worth of living expenses saved up to build a proper safety net. Now, if you're living paycheck to paycheck right now, I know this can sound incredibly daunting. But remember, building this doesn't happen overnight. Even putting away just a very small amount consistently is going to help you recover way quicker. Now, where should this money actually live? You want your emergency fund to be safe, accessible, and definitely not easily mixed up with your daily spending money. A federally insured bank or credit union account is generally going to be your safest bet. You could use a prepaid card, but definitely be careful with hidden fees there. And keeping it in easily lost cash at home, that carries the absolute highest risk of loss or theft. Keep in mind the interest rate on this specific account isn't your primary goal. Safety and accessibility are what really matter here. To guarantee you actually build this fund, you really must advocate for the pay-yourself-first mentality. Make saving automatic. Literally, set up recurring transfers from your checking account straight to your savings account every single payday. Or check to see if your employer's direct deposit allows you to automatically split your paycheck right between two accounts. If you just don't have to think about it, the habit becomes just as routine as a tax deduction, and your savings will just quietly grow in the background. Finally, Section 5, investing for your future and growing your money through compound interest. Okay, once your emergency fund is locked in and secure, it's time to pivot to long-term wealth building. This means exploring how your money can grow in employer-sponsored plans like 401ks or IRAs. When you do this, the absolute magic of compound interest becomes crystal clear. Compound interest is simply when you earn interest on both the money you save and the interest you've already earned. It snowballs. Listen to this jaw-dropping stat. If you set aside just $100 every year starting at age 14, assuming a 5% return, you'd have about $23,000 at age 65. But if you wait until age 35 to start saving that exact same $100 a year, you'd only have about $7,000 at age 65. Starting as early as humanly possible is absolutely critical. Time is, without a doubt, your greatest asset. But a very quick word of caution as you begin investing. As the Department of Labor points out, all financial services have costs. When you look at your 401k or your investment options, you have to watch out for fees. They generally fall into 3 main buckets: plan administration fees for day-to-day operations, investment management fees that are deducted directly from your returns, and individual service fees for optional features. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how a seemingly tiny fee impacts you over time. Imagine an employee with 35 years until retirement and a $25,000 balance. If they earn an average 7% return, but they pay just 0.5%, 0.5% in fees, their balance grows to $227,000. But if the fees are just one single percentage point higher at 1.5%, that balance grows to only $163,000. That tiny 1% difference in fees drains the final retirement account balance by a staggering 28% over 35 years. Always, always check the expense ratios on your accounts. Conclusion: taking charge of your financial well-being. Today, we have followed your paycheck on a complete chronological journey. We went from day one taxes to securing an employer match to building a realistic 50-30-20 budget, padding out an emergency cash reserve, and finally, leveraging the incredible power of compound interest for your future. You now have a clear, totally actionable roadmap. I want to leave you with a final empowering thought. You have the tools now. You understand the terminology. You know exactly where the money goes. So what is the very first step you will take on your next payday? Are you going to automate your savings? Will you check your 401k fees? The choice is entirely yours, and your financial future starts right now. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and hey, happy earning.